And we're on.
Oh, yay. It's happening.
Yes, so I'm sitting here with Anouska Firth. You've come into Sydney for an event. We'll talk about that a bit later. I don't want to give away the surprise. I like we'll build this one a little bit. So for people that don't know you, okay, you're obviously not from Sydney, so I've said you come in for an event. Where did you grow up?
Well, okay, this is a little bit of a surprise, something I don't like to always admit, but since I'm in Sydney, I'll admit it. I was actually born in Wahroonga.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
On the Lower North Shore?
Yeah. So, but that's because my parents moved over here for a couple of years and had 2 children. And when I was 9 months old, they moved back to WA, which is where my dad's family have been since the 1800s. But so I actually was born. I can't say I was born and bred in WA. I can only say that I was, I don't know, raised in WA. But so Sydney does feel kind of like home, even though I was raised on the West Coast.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I guess, did you grow up in Perth or which?
Yeah, in Scarborough, City Beach. So on the water there, which is just
nice
a dream. Yeah, absolute dream.
It's one of those ones when you go to Perth, you always want to, seeing the sunset is one of those things because on the East Coast, we only see the sunrise.
Yes.
Right? Over the water anyway, I should say.
Yeah, look, I'm so patriotic of WA. West is best. There's just so many reasons why WA is better, but jokes. But yeah, the sunset is amazing, and I was so blessed to live just a couple of streets away from the ocean growing up. So the whole state is phenomenal. If you get a chance to travel it, you should do 100%.
Yeah. So so you grew up in Scarborough. What was life like for you growing up? Like, what are some of those memories, I guess, for you growing up in that area?
Yeah. So I come from a big family, 4 brothers, 1 sister. My mum immigrated over to Australia from Holland when she was 21.
Wow.
And she's now been here over 53 years, I think it is. And so they got married, had all of us. And my dad was a leader of a Catholic charismatic community.
Wow.
So growing up, we were a very religious home. And that was beautiful. There was a lot of focus on family and community and faith and values and morals that a Christian household would have. And that was great. I really think, especially now when I look around and the life that I've lived since, growing up, just how beautiful my childhood was and how special it was and how safe it was and how innocent it was. And I'm not sure if that's what we're bringing the next generations into because of everything, the way that the world is going. I feel very, very grateful that I still had that opportunity.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things that in today's world, it's very hard to switch off. With social media, with even like from people that are working, it's like you could have emails pinging you at all times of day, at night, and somebody, if they don't, maybe they don't know how to schedule an email to go out during work hours, and you get this email at 11 o'clock at night, and you're like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Right. And it becomes very hard to take a moment to have a reset for yourself. And it's only like those times when you might be doing something where you have to put your phone away. And even the other night, it was funny. We're having dinner. So obviously at dinner, we try not to touch our phones or anything like that. And then Ange picked up her phone after dinner and she was like, geez, I put my phone down for an hour and now it's going crazy because the Pope passed away.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was
global.
Yeah. And so then, then she's like, oh, now now she has to do a whole bunch of things on social media for the church and all that sort of stuff. And so it was just that was 8:30 at night.
Yeah.
Right. So we're in an age where it's where things in the past, it was okay, that can wait till tomorrow.
Yeah.
Now it's everything has to, it's almost like you feel obligated that you have to respond.
Yes.
In a timely fashion.
Yes.
It's it's like an expectation of society that you're always on.
Always on and always aware. And because there's so much happening everywhere. And I'm very guilty of this, of wanting to be up to date on everything. Yeah. And you just can't. You just can't. There's just so much happening. And I mean, growing up, we didn't even have a TV all the time. We had to hire it, for the holidays. And so just spending time outside, hours outside, I think, wow, that's such a luxury now when we're inundated with technology and it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So overwhelming.
I think also, parents are probably more scared to send their kids outside. Like in the
Yeah,
past, it was kind of like, you send them out and when the street lights turn on,
Still
that's
safe.
when you got to come home, right?
Yeah.
But nowadays, I think, because we're always in this heightened state, it makes us more anxious for almost everything that we do.
Yeah.
Because like, I think the likelihood or the rate at which those negative things would have happened in the past are probably the same as what they are today. But it's just because it's more exposed to you via the news and that kind of stuff that you're probably thinking, shit, there's people getting kidnapped all the time. Or there's so many things that can go wrong if I let my kids out of my sight.
Yeah. And technology opens children up to so much more opportunities to be abused or to be manipulated. It's actually quite terrifying, the access that people have if they have wrong intentions with children now.
Well, there's I can't remember who said this to me or who said it in general, but it was like the moment you want your children's childhood to end is the moment you give them a smart device. Because they can suddenly access all of these things that they never had access to, and if you don't have the appropriate safeguards or things in place, then it's like you don't really know what they could be getting up to, because it's not like you can watch them 24 hours of the day. It's not feasible to do that. And it's funny, like I see like some of the other cohort in my daughter's year, and they're only young, like year 3 level, and it's like some of them have phones already. Like, what do you need a phone for in year 3?
Yeah, you don't.
You don't, right? But, at the same time, it's like you go to a restaurant nowadays and it's not uncommon where you see like a toddler there with a phone getting spoon-fed.
Yeah.
Like they're just little things, and I don't say this from a point to like try and be judgmental to those parents, but it's just like I think every household has to decide, what is it, what are the values that are important to them, right? For us, mealtime is one of those times where we want to be together as a family, and I think there's some beauty in that, right? Like you mentioned like being what's the word you put? A Catholic, charismatic.
Yeah,
charismatic Catholic.
Yeah,
is it?
Yeah, it is. It's Catholic charismatic. So in the, again, don't quote me, I think in the 1980s there was a charismatic renewal in America within the Roman Catholic Church, and that spread over to Australia. And when it did, there were some people, my dad involved in this, that created a community for that expression of the Roman Catholic faith. So it's kind of a mix of the more religious elements of traditional Catholicism, but then they have this Pentecostal arm where they believe in the moves of the Holy Spirit and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's an additional. It's no subtraction from the traditional Roman Catholicism, but then they have this added element. So that's what I was raised in. That's what they led. Yeah.
So then when it came to schooling, did you go to like a public school or Catholic school?
No, I went to my local Catholic primary school, which was great. And then I wanted to go to another Catholic school, but my dad, for myself and my younger brother, because I'm the second youngest, he actually pulled us out from the Catholic education system at the time because it wasn't where it had been. The standard had lowered, and I was put into a non-Catholic Christian high school, which was fantastic. It really was. And it had maintained that level that they were wanting, that my elder siblings got with the education and also with the values and morals.
And faith, yeah.
Yeah.
So then what kind of a kid were you at school? Like, do you remember what your teachers used to say about you?
Yeah. Don't really know if I want to remember, but yeah. I was definitely more of the class clown.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. That was more me. And look, I did get in a bit of trouble, but it was never too much trouble.
Yep.
And yeah, I was more the jokester, the class clown, and always the potential. I was that kid, where the teachers give the feedback and they're like, if Anouska just focused a bit more, she's got so much potential. If she just tried a bit harder, she's got so much potential. So I don't really know. It's kind of like winning one of those like extra awards, when you haven't got the first, second or third place.
Participation award.
It's a participation award. It's like you could be something great. You're not, but you could be one day. So I don't really know what to do with that. But yeah, so school was good though. I didn't find it too difficult, but I I had always had insecurities. So that was kind of my stumbling block. And I think being funny and that kind of character that I have in me already, putting that forward was a protection kind of mechanism. Yeah.
What was it? I guess, you know, when you think about your siblings, right, what was the dynamic like?
So my sister, she's the eldest. She's 12 years older than me, and she's so smart. She was like one of the ducks of her year. She did law and French at uni, and she's just everything that I always then compared myself to what I should be and could be, because it's just us two girls. And in between us, we got 3 boys and then another one underneath me. And my brothers are just so cool. They're like, one of my older brothers, you know, he lived in a van around Europe and like, you know, was running like champagne at festivals across Europe, and like he's just so cool. And, you know, my other brother, they're just cool. And so I always wanted to be like my older siblings. And I think that's probably quite normal.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how much they appreciated that, because there is a bit of an age gap as we go down. So my older brother closest to me is 4 years older than me. So, but I just always thought that they were the coolest, you know, surfing and skating and playing music and,
I think that's every sibling, right?
Like
They don't take into account that there's this age gap between, like 12 years between you and your older sister, right? But it's like, that's what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
Right? And then to her, you're the annoying little sibling.
100%.
Yeah.
Like I remember reading in one of her diaries, or it was on a video, because my dad we have like our whole lives on film. Like it's pretty special. Nice. Yeah. All of our trips over to Holland, because that's where mum's from. We used to go over there and see all her family, and dad would film. And Natasha was just saying like, oh, Anouska, she's so annoying. Oh, it's little sister. But if I was her, I would have been so annoyed as well, because, you know, I used to go in her room and wear her clothes, even though I was, you know, 12 years younger and all that stuff. But I just thought she was, you know, amazing. And I think that's great, you know, to see our siblings like that. But 100% she was, I don't want to babysit Anouska anymore. She's so annoying. Yeah. I had a lot of personality growing up, Johnny. So that's the other part that I'm sure my parents or my family would very quickly say. I was full of character, personality. So
the stubborn one.
100%. Yep. The one that had tantrums beyond the years when you probably should have stopped having tantrums.
The defiant one.
100%. Yeah.
And it's all I think like a portion of that is in relation to, like, you've got this older sibling who's like almost like the perfect one, right?
Yeah.
And then you there you are, and it's like, well, I can't do the thing she does.
Yeah.
So then you have to find your own way to get your own attention, right?
Yeah.
So then you sort of, you know, a little bit attention seeking in that regard, and then it's like, oh, you know, if I play up a little bit, then people will laugh along with me.
Yes.
And you don't really discern that it's like, well, are they laughing at me or with me?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter.
It's attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in a large family, like, everybody's vying for their own attention. Right?
Yeah.
So whether it's the brothers or your younger brother, like they want their attention too.
Yes.
And so they've got to come up with their own ways to sort of find that.
And I think when you're older, you don't have that desperate longing to know who you are yet. Like you've come to that point, hopefully, that you know who you are. Whereas when you're young, you don't know who you are. And I just wanted to be like my older siblings. So for any attention that I could get in whatever way I would get it, totally psychoanalyzing my childhood, but you know, then I would get it. But now I look back and I'm like, oh, you just didn't know who you were. You weren't confident. You were insecure. Obviously, I wasn't. I didn't feel safe in who I was, or confident, and so my identity. I think it all comes down to identity.
Yeah. And you're trying to find out who you are.
Like yeah. I mean, that's literally one of my earliest memories was I used to stare in the mirror in my eyes and just say, who am I? Who are you?
Really?
Yeah. Like for as long as I can remember, I had this existential crisis, just completely. Who am I? Why am I here? From a very, very young age.
And then, there's some pretty like deep questions for
Yeah.
a young child
For a kid.
for a kid, right? Did you ever like have those conversations with your parents? Like, did they ever try and talk to you about it?
Yeah. So, I mean, they had the answer. We used to read the Bible every night and pray and all of that. I guess the difference was I didn't feel that I always believed in God. I always knew that there was a God. Like, I had an awareness of the spiritual world, spiritual reality, whether that was good or bad. So I remember seeing things and hearing things when I was little, and having a lot of fear around death and around nighttime and things like that. And the solution that my parents had for life and for hope and for relationships was the Bible and the story of Jesus and the life that he had and the hope that he gave to people from what he did on the cross and provided by his death and resurrection. And I believe that there was something bigger, but I didn't find it in the pews of the church. I wanted to. I had a real longing and a deep yearning to know who I was, to find that fulfillment from a very young age. And I did try reaching out like that, and I think I had a faith to an extent, but I felt it was very impersonal. I was quite fearful of God. I saw him as a judge, waiting until I did something wrong.
Too much Old Testament.
Very Old Testament. Very, very like I couldn't do anything right, and I was just terrified. I was like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it so I don't go to hell, which is just so wrong. That's so wrong. It's just so inaccurate. And that was something that when I had a radical encounter about 6-7 years ago now, I had to break down and I had to work through, was this misconception that I had of who I believed God to be and Jesus to be, because he wasn't what I thought he was. And I thought when I was growing up that he had taken my dad away from me, because dad had spent
so much time
with the church and with him. And I thought, what kind of God would take
a dad away from you?
Exactly.
It's you just reminded me of an earlier episode that I did with one of my friends, Aaron. And his dad was really into motor racing, like cars and things like that. And I asked Aaron, did that ever make you want to get into it? And then he was like, my dad was so into it that I actually resented it.
Yeah.
Because he was so into his cars that it would take time away from his relationship with his dad.
Yes.
And so rather than him being able to enjoy the love that his dad had and being able to share that passion with his son, it went the opposite way. So it's kind of interesting, that there are things that that we as individuals hold like really valuable, but we also, when you become a parent, you got to like know how to manage that and temper that so that you don't turn your kids away from that. So like I'm really big into martial arts, and so one of the things like all my friends and anyone I meet are like, so your kid's doing martial arts? I'm like, yeah, but I don't put any pressure on them.
Yeah.
Because it was like, if I really love this thing and I really enjoy doing something, I want them to experience it for themselves, like being really passionate about doing something, right? But then if I put pressure on them, it's going to suck all the joy out of it.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, when you're thinking about it, like it resonates on so many levels, just because, your dad's obviously, he's thinking that he's doing the right thing.
Yes.
Because he's like, okay, I feel like, maybe it's his calling, right? And he's then trying to pursue something that he thinks, it's going to be good for my family. I'm going to raise my kids well, and I'm going to, use all these values and all these sorts of things to hopefully give them a better life. But then there's a point of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
Where, and I always think about this just from the perspective of, especially in today's world where people work so much, right? And like, especially for males, where if you're a dad, you have this real, that you're supposed to provide for your family. And it's really difficult where, for any dad that's lost their job or like hasn't got work on a consistent scale, it's like you feel like horrible. Yeah. Like it whittles away at your own sense of self, because you're just like, I'm supposed to be this person that provides for my kids. And if you can't provide for your kids, it's like, well, what are you? like you're useless kind of a thing. Like you start to engage in this negative self-talk. And so, yeah, like I think it's very difficult because, like, how do you, for any individual that's going through something and perhaps they're working so much, like all their kids really want is just time with the parent.
Yeah, I remember one of the counsellor people at the last long-term rehab that I was in, which happened to be Christian, which happened to then foster that radical encounter that I had, saying or explaining how children, their brains don't operate like ours do as adults. They do not comprehend or perceive things as we do. And so, Sally might push Peter off the swing when she was 7 and it's nothing, or she might do it and Peter holds that rejection because he can't perceive or make sense of it as we would if it happened to us now. He doesn't have that clarity, that understanding. And I think that makes so much sense because now I can say, well, my dad ministered and served for over 4 decades, and that's beautiful. A lot of families are so indebted and so grateful and are flourishing because of the work that my parents have done in the community and for the church. And I see that and it's beautiful. But as a kid, I just so resented God and my dad and felt rejected by both of them. And I think we get our identity is cultivated at home, in the home. And like you said, the dad is the provider and the protector, and you take that away or you have the perception that that is absent because it wasn't. He provided for us and we still had a great relationship, but it wasn't to the level that I obviously craved as a child, and I had that perverted thinking of God taking him away from me. And I carried that for decades, which is the wild part.
Yeah.
And that rejection just went into or manifested into addictions and, just added to other broken situations in my life. And it's wild when you break it down to where it comes from.
Yeah.
Because he had good intentions. He never had the intention of hurting. He wanted to do right. And he's a great man. And I think how many people does that happen to, they don't intend for that to happen to their children, but it does.
Yeah.
And it just, to me, it highlights the importance of the home, of having a stable relationship with the mother and the father and the children in the home, and that being the priority.
Yeah. Because
we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. It's that support that you get when you have like two people that have a common goal in life, like in terms of raising a family. I think that's such a powerful thing. And I think like I often talk about relationships from a car sales perspective because that was like the industry that I was in. But I think a lot of the times in relationships, people don't really step out exactly like what are they looking to achieve from this relationship, because there's so many factors why people could enter into a relationship. But it's almost like, so to use the car sales analogy, it's like when somebody comes into your dealership to buy a car, chances are they have an idea of what they want.
Yeah.
And then, as the car salesperson, you're almost like the matchmaker to go and say, okay, you have an idea of what you want. Let me show you what those things look like. Maybe take it for a test drive. So, in the relationship world, or you date that person to see if that's exactly where you want to be. And then it's like, can you see yourself owning this car? Can you see yourself in this relationship? It's the same thing. But then a lot of the times, people get caught up on the price before they actually have worked out, well, what are the actual conditions of the sale, right? It's the same thing in a relationship. It's like people get caught up on, okay, well, where are we going with this before they've actually said, well, what do you want out of life, right? Because if you guys don't want the same things out of life, well, what are you negotiating over?
It's crazy. I used to think growing up, because there was the mindset and the attitude within the community and the church and the people that I was around when I was younger and in my early teenage years, that you wouldn't start dating until you knew that you wanted to get married and that you knew who you wanted, what kind of person you wanted to get married to. And I never understood that. And now, on the other side of a lot of life, I think there's so much wisdom in why rush into anything before you know who you are. It's very foolish, I think, and very dangerous to then enter into something that is so serious, such a level of intimacy, these relationships that people are getting into without knowing yourself or knowing who they are or knowing what you want. And I think, we have to guard our hearts above all things. And when I talk to so many people, it always comes down to the heart of what they've been through in their heart and what they opened their heart to and what their heart was even not opened to but forced upon their heart. And that's where the healing and the wholeness needs to come from. And if we're just handing that to anyone without honouring it for the heaviness and the value that it is, but I think that also ties into like the dignity of women and the dignity of men and honouring each other as for the other parts that we are, and I think that's lost as well.
Yeah, I think people conflate, the whole equality thing as like, well, anything you can do, I can do as well.
Yeah.
But it's like, you don't go and say that about apples and oranges. You know, if you got one apple and one orange, like you don't go and say, well, this orange needs to taste like an apple.
Yeah.
And you don't go and say to the apple that, hey, this apple needs to taste like an orange.
What about like, I don't know, the whole feminism, it's just gone too far. It's just become something that it never was intended to become. But what about those of us that don't want to be all apples and oranges to be apples and oranges? What if we like apples being apples and oranges being oranges? What if we admire and respect and honour the innate nature of men to protect and women to nurture? What about...
Yeah, sounding very bigoty. Anouska, that's people are going to call you a bigot. So to sort of pull it back to, I guess, your story, right? So when you're in high school, out of curiosity, did you have any idea what you wanted to do after high school?
Yeah, so I was always obsessed with Indiana Jones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and archaeology.
Yep.
And I always wanted to be an archaeologist. I was obsessed with Egypt. I considered maybe doing biblical archaeology or archaeology, and they only offered that here in Sydney. Oh, okay. And in UWA, the Egyptology was in Sydney at the Macquarie Uni, but UWA offered archaeology, and I missed out by 0.5%.
No way.
Yeah, it's such a sad story, but
where you got it?
That was because I didn't tap into my potential.
Yeah.
Because I had like a tutor in the last year because I just was that procrastinator studier.
Yeah.
That left it to the last minute, and I realised, if I actually want to get into this, I better try. But yeah, just missed out, and I started anthropology instead, but with the hope and plan to move on to archaeology. But that's when life got in the way of that. So I always, was interested in archaeology and art, and wanted to pursue just being Indiana Jones would just be so cool. Like, who wouldn't want to go treasure hunting around the world? Like, that would be just a dream. And I'm sure that's not exactly all the archaeologists do. Yeah, but in my head it was, and that just sounded like amazing. But yeah, then I finished school and I did a year of Bible college because I wasn't sure after not getting in, I put it on pause with the anthropology. And then it was in that gap year that I developed anorexia. So I went from Bible college to Sydney to here to do a year of running retreats in high schools with the community that my parents were a part of. And it started in the Bible college, and then while I was here in Sydney, it manifested into anorexia. And when I went back to Perth after that year, I was just hospitalised.
Wow.
Yeah. So diagnosed, hospitalised, and so I did attempt to start that uni the following year, but it went from turning 17, 18 to till I was 24 in and out of hospital. So I spent a lot of time combating that eating disorder, and I started and stopped studying. So I started anthropology and stopped, went traveling with my family, and then would come back and get put back in hospital. And then I started studying fashion at TAFE, and then the same cycle, and then social work, and then same cycle, and then pharmacy apprenticeship, same cycle, until I finally overcame it at 24.
So what did something trigger, the
Yeah.
anorexia? Like, what was it?
I don't know. This is the wild thing. Like, I cannot tell you how many psychiatrists and psychologists and therapy plans and things that I've done in my lifetime. I think it's closer to 20 different rehab clinic long-term things that I've been through for drugs eventually, but also with mental health issues. And they always, that's their job, to psychoanalyze you and to try and figure out what happened. And I don't remember anything specific other than always feeling like I was off, like I was just a wrong egg, the bad egg, and that God had made a mistake. And I think part of that was encompassed in the rejection that I felt from God and from my dad, putting that together, but also blaming myself and the way that I looked, and just always thinking, if I was somebody else, I wanted my life, but if I looked like somebody else, if I was somebody else in my life, everything would be okay.
Were you a bigger kid growing up? Or?
Yeah, I was, but not like, I was never morbidly obese or anything like that. And I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, Anouska, no, you weren't. But I definitely, had I was not thin growing up. And obviously my perception of that was warped as well. But I think I looked for something to blame and something to, because I've spent so much time obviously working through all the misconceptions and the rabbit holes that my mind led me down, some very dark ones. And, when you think that God, the creator of the universe, exists, but he has rejected you and you were a mistake, then you kind of are stuck with where you're going to go in life from that. I couldn't kill myself because I had been brought up that it was a mortal sin, so that I would go to hell if I did that. But what was life? What was the point of it if I was wrong, if I wasn't meant to be here? So that existential crisis was kind of
always there.
That turmoil I felt constantly, and I wanted to make peace with that. But how do you make peace with something when the creator of that piece didn't mean you? But yeah, like it's so warped. And so when I did the youth mission team, I had already started obsessing over my weight. And I think just being away from home, I was young and under a lot of pressure, and I think it just had an opportunity to manifest into a severe eating disorder. And that's when I lost all the weight, and that's when they put me into hospital. And yeah,
I don't think that's warped. And the reason why I say that, like I've probably actually changed my perspective on this, because a lot of people will be like, oh, well, when we look at kids and we say, oh, God's made such a beautiful creation, right? And we think that, kids are like this pure, innocent type of thing. But like, and I don't think even like, all the people that are very au fait with the Bible or any of the sort of biblical texts and things like that can probably correct me on this, but I don't think the Bible actually says that, children are pure and all that sort of stuff, right?
From birth,
from birth we're broken, so to speak. And it's like one of the best examples I can give you of that is like, I can look at my kids sitting on the couch and they might be watching TV and it'll be like, oh, you guys like angels. And then 2 seconds later, one of them's like kick the other one off the couch and then they're fighting. And it's like, why would you do that? Like, everything was peaceful. You're watching a freaking movie. You've got popcorn. You've got everything that you could possibly want in this world. And then you just decide, you know what, it'd be funny if I just kick this other kid off the couch.
Yeah.
Right? And then they get into a fight over it.
Evil, man.
Right? It's just, so it's like, you know, so it's funny, you know, because like a lot of people like to use that analogy of, well, you know, well, God's made me this way, therefore it's okay.
Yeah.
Right? So they use that to normalize things. But I don't think that's necessarily the case, because if that was the case, well, you know, when my kid decides that they want to be evil,
yeah,
they can be freaking evil.
Yeah.
And it's okay because God made them that way. Well, no, it's not. That's the whole point, is that when you have this awareness that you can, like, and you know, I used to have this really negative connotation to the word sin, like sinners and things like that. Like, because I had friends in high school, like I wasn't Christian or anything growing up. And so I had Christian friends in high school, and, you know, like everybody would say, oh, you know, we're all sinners, and I'll take that as like, you know, very judgy, you know, well, you're a sinner.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, well, fuck you. Well, language, but like, that's, you know.
You're a sinner. Yeah. I'm not a sinner.
Yeah. That kind of thing, right? You
don't
take
know
it
me.
You take it in a really judgmental kind of a way. And so it was kind of like, you know, like I used to have this really, really, I don't know, abrasive feel about like that word, in the sense of like, when people are trying to preach and do that sort of thing, it was like, oh, that's really judgmental, right? And it was only after I had like this, we don't have to go into it, but I've talked about it many times, about I had this psychedelic experience on some type of drug. And I was like, but one of the things, like, I guess one of these sort of epiphanies that came to me was when I was washing one of my kids who had just, like, you know, pooed in their diaper or whatever, and it was like messy, right? And I was washing this child, and they're in the bathtub, and like, yeah, there's the physical act of washing that child. But I had this like line of thinking that was something along the lines of like, well, when we consume life, like the natural byproduct is sin, you know, like just like when you eat food, well, you're going to pass waste, because it has to come in one hole and out the other. And so likewise, like one of the byproducts of living is that we have sin, whether it's sin in thought or sin in action. Like, there's many different layers to sin, but there is, you know, it's impossible for any person to say that they haven't sinned, because I guarantee you're going to have some kind of effed up thought at one point in your life, right? Like everybody has had like a nasty thought, like, you know, just what if I did this? You know, it doesn't mean you acted on it, but you thought it.
Yeah.
And the sheer fact that you thought it meant that, okay, you're not impervious to sin.
I think it's such a liberating thing to recognize that we're all sinners in need of a savior. I have found it the most liberating revelation in my life, because otherwise I'm fighting to fix myself, or to find somebody else to fix me, or to find some other medication or therapy group plan or something to fix my tendencies or my struggles, but to know that actually it's because, like you said, we're living in a broken world. It's a surrounded, and, you know, from birth, we're all born into sin. And so it's not unique to me. It's not unique to you. It's a human nature.
It's a human condition.
Exactly. We need to be redeemed from that. We need to be saved from that. And it's actually so liberating, because yes, it's me, but it's something that I can be relieved of. I can be set free from. I don't need to be in its chains and it's a slave to it, and try and, you know, cope with sin for the rest of my life. Well, no, I've actually got a promise. We've all got a promise, and that's the beauty of the gospel, isn't it?
Faith, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I ask about the anorexia?
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, so there's different kinds of eating disorders, but anorexia is where you just wouldn't eat, is that? Yeah,
so I mean, looking back, poor young me, like I think it's under 900 calories is technically starving.
Okay.
So I found that out, and I just made sure that I never ate more than that in a day. And if I did, I would throw it up. So I was a restrictive purger, and that got me down to 38 kilos and tube fed. And
wow.
Yeah.
38 kilos.
Yeah. And in and out of hospital, and on all different types of plans, and feeding programs and group plans and meds, because, you know, it's never just an isolated thing. So they also diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder, depression, anxiety, psychotic tendencies, you know, all these, self-harm. I was mutilating myself with self-harm, and obviously body dysmorphia. And so it was just this can of worms that, you know, Pandora's box that was just flung wide open. And they have a specialised unit and clinic in Perth for that. But I think what happened, it got to the point where I lost my identity. And this is where I believe it comes down to always just your identity. And I no longer had my name. I just called myself anorexic. I wasn't Anouska, I was just anorexic. And I couldn't pick a colour that I liked. I couldn't pick a song that I liked. I just didn't know what to do with myself, with my life. And the plan, if I had one, was to just fade away until I was dead. But then in the same breath, you know, I didn't want to die because I believed in that.
Things.
Yeah, exactly. But I was so terrified of living. And then I got so caught up in that psychosis that I believed that if I ate any part of a carrot or any part of an apple, I would become morbidly obese straight away. So there was no logic. And I think part of that is when you're starving your brain, you're not thinking right.
Of course not.
No. And so that was pretty terrifying. There were moments there that they thought that I wasn't going to make it, you know, my family, and I felt but so self-consumed, so self-consumed that I couldn't see it. I couldn't see the fear in other people, the concern in other people. I was so just obsessed with that identity and that fulfillment. Yeah, escaping. It was a form of escapism because I just became numb to all my fear, because I had a fear of not getting life right and a fear of death, and I guess it's a perfectionism thing. You know, if I can't be exactly what I need to be in my life, then why even try? And I mean, the irony of that is, well, then you're definitely wasting your life, aren't you? Yeah. If you're going to succumb to such a horrible illness and, you know, waste away in a clinic somewhere. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But I remember one of the things that helped me get out of that was that my dad broke his back. Oh. He fell from the top of the church. And yeah.
Top of the church? What was he doing up there?
Yeah, he was. Look, yeah, that's a very valid question. And instead of going around, he like skipped over the corner, and thank God he fell on, like, you know, the playground mats.
Yeah.
But underneath was concrete.
Yeah.
So he broke a couple of vertebrae in his back, and I remember seeing him in the hospital, and at this time I was very unwell. My younger brother actually was struggling with bipolar. He'd been diagnosed with bipolar at that time.
Wow.
So my parents were going through a lot. And I remember seeing my dad in the hospital bed and just being overwhelmed with this feeling that I'm sure that they had felt about me, which was just helpless. I couldn't control if he lived or died. I couldn't control if he was going to walk again. I couldn't make him be better. Because, you know, my family used to hug me and be like, Anouska, you've got to eat, you're dying, or whatever. And I was so numb to it, so detached. And I felt that in that moment. And that really had a strong impact on me. I remember my younger niece at the time, she was, I think, 7 or 8. And I had leave from the clinic one day, and she hugged me and she said, I'm skinny like you. And that terrified me, because if I was going to have an impact on them, that is not what I wanted to have.
Yeah.
And then my psychiatrist at the time said to me, Anouska, like, you're all talk and no action. You know, for 5 years now, you've said you want to get better and you want to change and you want life and you want all this stuff, but you're not making any of the positive changes. You're not sticking to the plans. You're not doing all this stuff. And so I remember making a deal with myself and being like, well, I know how to be like this, so I can always come back, but I'll try. I'll just try this thing. And I guess I've never really thought of the two together, but it's similar when I had that encounter it was called Esther House, where I was at, and I had this encounter with God, and I was terrified of, who do I become if I follow this? Do I lose my identity? You know, because and at the time my identity was rough and it was shattered and it was confused as well, but it was obviously comfortable to me to a degree. I was comfortable with the dysfunction and not knowing who I would be, but thinking and telling myself, I'm going to try. I've tried everything else. I'm going to try, and just taking that step of faith. And so with the eating disorder, then that led to recovery of that, but the depression and the self-harm and the anxiety kind of lingered, but it wasn't long until I felt pregnant for the first time. And that's when everything changed, everything, because I was just after my 25th birthday that I felt pregnant. And so I'd recovered for not even a year from the eating disorder. And I had the abortion, and everything I thought that I had overcome with the eating disorders just came back 1,000 million-fold worse. And that was when I realized I was absolutely in hell, and I'd put myself there in an absolute prison. Yeah.
So, okay, there's a few things.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, sorry.
So, when it came to the self-harm thing, so what were you doing? Were you cutting or something? Or?
Yeah, so I used to dig like holes. So like 3 centimeter holes, just take chunks out of myself.
With what? Like a spoon?
No, with like anything, knives, scissors. I'd break razors apart. I'd burn myself.
Yeah.
Like I'd burn spoons and then sizzle them on myself, or I'd just hit myself with things. Yeah. So that's where all the scars are from, the mutilating thing. And I think that was also just the escape, because the pain gives you an
something
escape.
to focus on.
Yeah. And yeah, so, and in that there were a few attempts. Like I took too many of my medications, but there was always, or ran into traffic or slipped my wrist, but I never actually wanted to die. You know, I just felt so trapped and so, where do I go? What do I do? How do I get out of this existence? Because there wasn't any answer. I couldn't find an answer. And to be honest, it was driving me insane. Not knowing where to go, what to do, how to get out, who to... Again, it came back to like everybody's saying there's the answer, which is God is the answer, but he's not my answer. So can I find another answer?
Yeah.
You know? So I tried to pursue other things later down the track, more so with like Buddhism and when I was younger, a bit of the occult. But they didn't fulfill me, you know. Started studying numerology. I was going to be a numerologist, you know, find meaning in that, but that didn't fulfill me either. That didn't answer my existential questions and longing.
Identity is an interesting one, because I think a lot of what people are attached to their identity is like things that they do.
Yeah.
It's not really who they are.
No.
It's like, what do you do for work? It's like the first thing that most parents ask each other.
Yeah.
When you're trying to make small talk.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, it's actually a question that, and doesn't, not to say it pisses me off, but it's just like, what do I do? Like technically I don't even know what I do anymore.
Yeah. Bit of this, bit of that.
Yeah. And so it's like, you know, to go and provide an answer nowadays, it's like such a long-winded thing for me that I'm just like, can we just like skip that question and talk about something else?
I found it very confronting, having been removed from the mental health system I've finished at Esther 5 years ago. So I've been 5 years clean, 5 years from Esther, and stepping aside from it, and I haven't been on any medication, haven't seen any psychiatrist, haven't seen any psychologist, haven't been in a clinic or anything like that for 5 years, over 5 years. And to realize how much of my identity was caught up in what I was battling and how wrong that is. Because when I went into Esther, I remember meeting these women who were like, oh, who are you? And we had a rule there that you couldn't past talk, which didn't mean you couldn't talk about the years leading up to how you got to that point. But, you know, none of the negative, like you didn't need to talk about all that, the stuff, your crime or your drugs or whatever. They genuinely didn't see me for what I was battling, which was so different to all the other clinics and all the other specialists and things that I'd seen. I was either Anouska the anorexic, or Anouska the drug addict, or Anouska the mental health patient, and that was my identity. But to actually have people around me going, yeah, okay, we know that that's blah, 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 but who are you? You know, I want to know you. It's like, well, don't you want to know what I've been battling? Don't you want to know what I'm struggling with, or what I've been diagnosed with, or what I'm medicated for? Like, no, like, we want to know you. And that was very powerful, because it took away that crutch, I think, of having an identity of that dysfunction. You know, I don't believe anybody is their dysfunction.
Yeah.
No matter what we're battling or being challenged with and by, that does not define us. No.
Yeah, it's almost like when you're floating in space, you just want to grab onto the nearest thing that.
Yeah.
Even if you're out in the water,
Yes.
right? Like there's something floating by you,
Yes.
and you're in the middle of the ocean. You want to grab whatever you can cling to.
Yes.
Right? Because it's like, okay, there's a little bit of comfort in knowing that this thing's out here with me, but like it doesn't really take away from the base problem of like, hey, you're out in the middle of nowhere.
In space, yeah.
Yeah, you're in space, or you're in the ocean.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, you need to have some direction.
Yeah.
Right? And so yeah, the identity thing is definitely I think a lot of people can relate to that, because you know, especially like if you study something, or you go into a specific vocation or a field, and then that becomes your identity.
Yeah.
And then you get stuck with that. And then what happens when that one day that's taken away from you for whatever reason? Maybe like you get an injury at work and you can no longer do that. Like who are you then? You know, you're actually still the same person that you always were. But the question is, do you actually know who you are?
Yeah. And I think we find our sense of belonging in those ways as well. You know, if that's my identity, then if I'm around people like that, then I feel a sense of belonging. And that's why, you know, birds of a feather flock together, and people will attract that same spirit of like-mindedness, of whatever they identify themselves as. But there's so much more to people, and I think that's the thing that I get frustrated by, but I also am so empowered to speak into that space, because I know so many people that have struggled with crime or drugs or mental health or any of those things, and just to it is not to copy what my teacher said, but I see the potential aside from that, and to see people stuck in those elements, and to think that that's all they are, and that's all that they were made to be, and that's all that their future is set out for them to be. Oh, I think that's just such a lie. And you can break free out of that. You know, I think it totally, who we are, who we hang around, is so influential to who we become.
Yeah.
And I think that impacts our identity. You know, if you're always going to mental health clinic sessions and you're only ever talking to other mental health patients, well, yeah, you're going to talk a lot about your mental health diagnoses. Or if you're doing drugs all the time, then you're going to hang out with a lot of drug addicts.
Well, they're all self-limiting perspectives.
Exactly. It's so sad, and I truly believe it's so evil, because people are so great. They have greatness in them to be so much, and it pulls them down and pulls them back and cuts them off and shuts them down. And I think it's just tragic.
Well, unfortunately, that one is actually, like, I would always say that's an individual's journey, you know, because you can never, as much as we'd like to believe that, you know, we could do something that will help, you know, this person achieve greatness or whatever, the reality is all you can do is just be there for that person.
Yeah.
And they have to want it within themselves to go and achieve whatever it is that they want to do, right?
Yeah.
Like I often, I like thinking about like the concept of infinity, just in the sense of like when you really think about what the concept of infinity sort of means, is like, well, for something to be, and if the universe was infinitely large, as an example, there is another version of you and I having this exact same conversation. There's another version of you and I where maybe our roles are switched. But there is every single possibility that you can think of could exist, right? And that's the whole idea behind the concept of infinity. And how I like to use that that concept is then, okay, well, there's probably a version that is like the best version of me out there. So what do? Do I take the actions that try and lead me to be that best version of myself, or do I take the opposite actions, or maybe take no action? And, you know, I guess you call it the see, do, get paradigm. Like what you see determines what you do, and what you do determines what you get. So it's like, you know, when you look at like if people are out there and they're thinking, okay, and this was me when I was younger, you know, I used to think of success and think success was like monetary wealth and all of these sorts of things. So you chase that no matter what. And because that was the thing that I valued the most, then all of my actions determined, you know, were based around that. So what I saw was I want to be successful. What I do were the actions to be successful, and what I got was success. And then it's like, okay, well, is that what's success defined as for me now? You know, with 4 kids and all these other things in my life, it's like, okay, what's successful there? It's like, well, to me, it's like having the time to be able to spend with my kids. That's the definition of success for me. So it's like, how do I now structure my life to get that? Because the reality is that for majority of the vocations in life, and you could be as esoteric as thinking like something like, I don't know, to be an athlete, to being, you know, a Nobel Prize winning laureate or whatever. The reality is you could get there, right? But are you prepared to live the life that that person who studied to receive that Nobel Prize, and go through all the things that they had done to get to that point, or are you not? You know, if you want to go and be an athlete, are you prepared to do the long training days and all of those things that that person did to get there, or are you not? Because the reality is if your actions aren't congruent to that what you aspire to be, well, essentially you're just talking shit. But if you're living and breathing all of those actions to get you to that point, well, yeah, you could.
It's funny that you say that, because I remember thinking, because obviously when you're constantly having these existential thoughts, what's the point? Why are we here? What's the point? What is any of this? And I used to think, okay, so if I got the Nobel Prize for, you know, I don't know, not curing cancer, because I think that's already out there somewhere, but but go down that rabbit hole another day. But okay, so say I did, then what? You know, then what? Like, if we achieve these things that we put in place for our lives of what we hope to be, oh, I want to be a singer, or I want to be an athlete. Okay, and you get to that point, then what? Then what? Is this setting you up for your whole meaning of life, for the meaning of eternal life? Is this what you were made to be and to do? And is this the imprint that you're leaving? And that used to do my head in. And I think that's where I found a little bit of comfort for a little bit with the Buddhist thoughts, which was, well, if life has no meaning, then you make meaning out of it. And I thought, okay, all right, well, that kind of tricks my brain into thinking in a way that I can handle right now. I'll just make meaning out of something. But that's also hard, especially if you don't, well, what meaning and why as well. The Nobel Prize thing just reminded me of that. I was like, I used to think like that.
Well, the thing is like for most people in life, I have this concept where I talk about like there's different checkpoints in life, right?
Yeah.
And that's a checkpoint. When you have like a really big life goal and you achieve it, and then you realize that it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, and your life didn't change one iota, then you realize, okay, shit, there's more life than this.
Yes.
Right? Because if you get to that, and don't get me wrong, some people might achieve that big life goal and then it's like, well, now I need a bigger house.
Yeah.
Now I need a bigger car. Now I need a bigger jet. Like, you know, there are people that probably think like that and they're stuck on that sort of hamster wheel, always chasing and wanting because you were never enough. You know, I like the story of like the Mexican fisherman. I don't know if you ever heard this one, but I might have told this before. Apologies if I have, but it's essentially a parable which sort of goes along the lines of like an American tourist was, you know, on holidays. He's a businessman, but he's on holidays in Mexico, and this Mexican fisherman has just come back from his day's fishing, and he's got like these 6 beautiful fish, and the American tourist is like, mate, where'd you get those fish? You know, how long did it take you to catch them? And he goes, I was out for 3 hours. I'm going to go home and have fish with my family. And he's like, you know what? Like, these fish are so fantastic. Like, we could go and sell them at the market. You know, tomorrow, why don't you try fishing for maybe 5-6 hours, and maybe you get 20 fish or something like that, and we'll go sell them at the market. And then the Mexican fisherman was like, okay, and then what? He goes, well, we'll collect that money. We'll go and pay a few more guys to come out and go fishing with you, and we'll get more fish, and we'll sell more fish at the market. We'll make more money. And he's like, and then what? And it's like, okay, well then, by that stage we'll have a roster of guys all fishing, and we'll collect our money, and then we'll start exporting the fish into the US. There's a big market for fish in the US. And he's like, okay, and then what? And it's like, well, by that stage, we'll have some commercial fishing trawlers, and we'll start exporting this fish around the world. And the Mexican fisherman was like, and then what? And it's like, oh, well, by that stage, we're probably like 30, 40 years on. And what we'll do is we'll try and package up the company so that we can sell it, and then we'll go retire and sit at the beach with our family and spend time with our kids. And then the Mexican fisherman was like, so I go out for 2-3 hours every day, come home, spend time with my family and kids, and you want me to work longer times, longer hours to achieve all of these things just so that I can come back to where I am today? And so it was like, I often think about that, because it was like, yeah, like people get caught up in like, you want to achieve this, this, and this, and then what, right? And then what, and then what, and then what? So to sort of like provide some, I guess, like a different perspective in terms of like some of the things that you were talking about in terms of the existential crisis, right? There are only two ways that you can go with it when you realize that this is the way life is. You either go down this pathway of then realizing that, hey, life is meaningless, because the reality is in 100 years, you're forgotten. In 1,000 years, you're a speck of sand.
Yeah.
In 10,000 years, nobody would even know who you are, right? So very easy to go down that pathway and just go, well, might as well just live for the now.
Yeah.
Right? The flip side is that, and this is where it starts to, for whatever reason, there are, I always feel there's a big connection between psychedelics and religious teachings, because one of the other epiphanies that I had when I was on this experience was like, well, that's kind of like what the gift of life is that, you're given this gift of life where you can choose to do whatever you want with it, right? And it's like, it was interesting because like there was quite a few thoughts that came to my mind, but one of them was like along the lines of how a lot of wars are actually started in God's name, right? But like, does it really matter that people fight a religious war for God? Like, if you're this all-powerful thing, right, like, it doesn't really mean much to you, because you don't have the ego to go and say, well, it's because I'm God, right? Like, if you're God, you don't have this ego. If anything, it's like you probably feel a little bit more sad that, people have chosen, in your name, right? Like, people have used your name to go and kill other people and commit sins that are against what you have given the life to these people for. And it's kind of like, I like doing this as a thought experiment. It's like God's almost like sitting there, and people like often talk about, well, if God exists, why is there suffering? It's like God's sitting back there, and he's just saying, it's almost like he's got this bet, that, okay, I've given these people life, I'm allowing them to experience the full human experience, on one side, it's like, okay, the positive side of the experiment is that life continues forever. The negative side of the experiment is that the evil side wins, and life ceases to exist because we all just killed ourselves. Like, we killed each other, and we committed such atrocities to each other that we blow up the world, and we cease to exist. And like, from God's perspective, it was like, oh well, that was a nice experiment. I guess human nature is flawed.
Yeah, well, it's definitely flawed, right? And I think that's where, my goodness, so many things in my brain as you're talking. And I think that's kind of more the reality, the second part of that, where it's like we are flawed from birth. We do have this inherent brokenness for all our achievements and for all our good intentions. We do have this propensity towards sin and dysfunction, and whether we mean it or not, it stems from us, from within us, from our hearts. And that's where we need that hope that this isn't all for nothing, that we're not all just here just to blow each other up, that there wasn't a God that was just like, yeah, okay, let's see what happens, roll the dice and let them play, that he actually cared enough about the fact that we're broken to come down and sort it out for us in his son, and that is, again, the glory of the gospel. But I think that hope, for so much of my life, once I entered the mental health system, and especially after my abortions, because I had one, and then 2 years later, I had a second one. So they just catapulted me into a state of being and a state of mind that was incompatible with life, really. It was just so tormenting because I knew exactly what I was doing when I had those abortions, as in because I was raised in a Christian home, I knew the Christian values and morals of life, and because I knew basic science and biology, I knew that life begins at the moment of fertilization in the womb. So I was well aware that when I fell pregnant, I was pregnant with a baby, a human life, and that baby was mine. And so 12 weeks on, that baby was very developed and was innocent and precious and was worthy of life and had innate dignity and, you know, was made in the image of God. And yet I chose because I felt that I wasn't ready to have a baby, and I was terrified of having a baby, and I didn't want my body to change. Having just spent all those years with the eating disorder, I didn't want to fall pregnant and go through pregnancy, and I didn't want to be with a man that was not attached, not committed, not a good guy. But all that to say, I knew when I went to the abortion clinic that I was killing my baby and ending their life. And so that it's one thing to say that and to know that before you do it, but to wake up and have done that and then know that you can never restore that life and you can never undo what you've done and you can never take that back and you have to live with that act was horrific. And that, I always say, it was a piercing emptiness. It was, I knew immediately that life had gone and that I was responsible for taking that life, and that just annihilated me. And so, yeah, it catapulted me towards drug addiction, and that's where I found a coping mechanism to escape from that reality, that torment, because I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder from the abortion. I had nightmares, severe nightmares. I had chronic panic attacks if I heard a baby crying. It was all consuming. I was so, it was like you turned off or on a light switch and then turned it off. It was that light and day inside, internally, that I knew I had done something so wrong, so immoral. And the worst part about it was that I couldn't undo it. That was the thing that was so tormenting. But drugs gave me a reprieve. Drugs gave me the delusion of being away from that reality. But obviously, when you go into a heavy drug addiction, and my choice was heroin mainly, that's also incompatible with life. So I then tried to go back to study and continue on with work and things like that. But no, I just gave myself over to this addiction and ended up over east New Zealand and then over east doing crime, addiction, in toxic relationships, domestic violent relationships, and then I fell pregnant again. So then I chose heroin over my baby. Yeah. Because I was faced with the choice of whether I keep my coping mechanism and double down on it, or I relinquish it and I nurture. You know, we go back to like those gender roles. You know, women have this beautiful gift. It's our superpower, motherhood. And we have it in us to nurture these precious lives, and abortion goes against it on every level. It violently tears that life from the mother. It's an invasion on both fronts, to the mother and to the innocent child, and there's nothing natural about it. And that has a spiritual impact on the mother and an emotional and a mental and on every level. And I was terrified of not having that coping mechanism. So I chose to keep using and had that second abortion. And then
So when you just going back to the first abortion, I guess when you go to a clinic, so you already made up your mind that that's what you were going to do? Or?
No, so I found out I was pregnant just after my 25th birthday, and I was in it wasn't serious with this guy, but serious enough that I wanted it to work, and I had hoped that when he said he would stick around, that he would either way, he said. But he'd already had previous abortions with other women, and he'd already had a child to a woman who had refused to have an abortion with him. And when he said it was up to me and he'd support me either way, I knew what he was really saying, that he didn't want to be a father again. And I was terrified. So it was just it helped me halve the guilt, half the blame to make that decision. But I ended up moving out of my parents' home. At that time, I was living with them and went so that they wouldn't see that because I was quite sick from morning sickness. And
so they didn't know?
No, I didn't tell my parents. There was no way that they would have ever supported, because I grew up going to pro-life rallies and pro-life prayer vigils, and my mum prayed out the front of abortion clinics for like 20-something years or 30-something years every Friday. So when I was on the way to that clinic, I was actually praying that mum wouldn't be there. Because what am I going to say if I see her, and there was only 2 abortion clinics in Perth at the time. So I was like, well, it's, 50-50 chance she might be here or not. But I waited a couple of weeks because I knew that at 12 weeks it would become a more serious procedure. And I didn't want to do that. And so I waited till the cutoff, which was 12 weeks. And that was a little while. It was a couple of weeks that I waited. But I knew, as soon as I fell pregnant, I knew what I was going to do. It was just a matter of time. I didn't want to believe that I would do it. I didn't want to be in the situation that I was in where I would do it. But the reality was that I was in that situation and that I wasn't going to let my child get in the way of what I thought was now finally a new lease on life.
Your recovery. Exactly.
And so I told myself all these sweet lies afterwards that I would live for the 2 of us, convinced myself that the sacrifice was well made. But, you can tell all the lies you want to the world and to yourself, but when you put your head on the pillow, you're the one that has to go to sleep with them. And I couldn't sleep with them. And they ate me alive at what I had done. And yet, and this is why I'm like, thank God for the gospel, right? Because I know that 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 I am a sinner. I know. And I doubled down on my sin when I was faced with the same predicament. And fully knowing that I would be taking another innocent life for my own desires, there's no reason to ever have to kill an innocent human being in the womb, but there was certainly was not in my case, in either of my cases. It was purely because I was being selfish. I didn't want to have a baby. And knowing that it was murder and I did it anyway, that mindset is terrifying. It's terrifying to me. But I did it. I doubled down. And I think you get to that point, or I got to that point in myself, in my state, where I just felt so broken and I felt so hopeless and so helpless. It was like, well, if God hadn't rejected me before, then he's certainly rejected me now. Because not only have I already killed one of my babies. I'm about to kill another one of my babies. And do you need another reason to reject me? Do you need another reason to hate me? Because that's what I thought. God hated me, you know, that I'd become this monster and that I was so unlovable. But at the same time, all I craved was love and acceptance and belonging and identity and hope. That's what I wanted. I wanted hope.
Mm.
And I didn't find it in the walls of clinics or anything like that. And I found a very deceptive, false offering of it in heroin. And I just gave myself over to it because I really believed that was my lot.
Mm.
That was it. That was it then.
You probably almost thought like that's all you deserved.
Exactly.
Right?
Like totally. It was actually the silver lining at the time. Like, okay, I am what I am, which terrified me, but I also have no way of not being what I am. I'm trapped in this insane torment. And, you know, I got to the point, I've experienced some severe psychoses in my time, where I just could not get a grasp on what reality was and what truth was. And that's why I actually could never handle psychedelics, because my brain was so on fine.
Yeah, it's on a balancing tipping point, right?
Already, that I couldn't. I went the other way when I did, and I was grateful to be, you know, on steady ground again. But I think that's why, you know, one of my friends recently said to me, you know, it's pretty amazing that you don't have those addictions and you don't have those outward manifestations of these inner struggles, but also, like, I'm not anxious. I don't get anxiety. I'm not depressed. I don't have psychotic episodes. All those things, all the inner turmoil and the struggle and all those things that ate me up and kept me imprisoned in myself and away from life and cut off from the world, I don't have them anymore. That is amazing, you know? And I was telling a friend the other day, because I'm re-enrolling for uni, because I did then a youth work thing at one point and then was going to do social work, but I'm not. I'm going to do legal studies instead. And I was feeling this anxiety, and I said to her, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I don't feel this anymore. Like, this was so unnatural to me that when I felt it again, it was strange. Yet I lived in that space for so long, and I never thought I would get out of it. I never thought I would see the day where I didn't hate myself. I never thought I'd see the day where I wanted to live, or I wasn't so insecure and so bound by other people's opinions and terrified of what life had to offer me and what I could offer the world, and just so caught up in the demons in my mind. I never thought I'd see the day, you know, and that's the bit where I liked what you said before, where it's an individual's choice. It's an individual path, and that can be quite heartbreaking, you know, when you see the epidemics of drug addiction and things like that, and knowing that it's an epidemic, but each person has to make that choice and has to take ownership of that and face that. And but knowing that they can is like the clincher for me, because I feel like you actually can. And I never thought that I could. I never thought I would have the life that I have now, the restoration with my family, with my mind, with my spirit, with my body, with my soul, everything. But I have. And that I just want for everyone, because nobody need be stuck in that darkness. There is a hope, you know, in that place where you feel like nobody sees you and nobody can reach you and there's no way out. There is still hope.
Yeah. You know, the image that comes to my mind is like you're in this pit, right? And you like, you know, almost like when the daylight's there, you can just see down to the bottom of the pit, and there's somebody there, you know, broken and crying.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a rope, right? The rope gets thrown down. you need to make that step. You got to
Yeah.
grab onto it. You have to climb it,
Yes.
right? And you have to pull yourself out
Yes.
of doldrums, right?
Yeah.
You can't just lie at the bottom of the pit and say, well, it'd be great to be up there.
Yeah.
You know, there's a way out and there's a rope there.
Yes.
But you as the individual have to want to grab on.
Yeah, and like you said before, you know, even if you had people help you climb the rope, well, when you get to the top, what's to stop you from falling back down? If
Exactly.
you haven't taken ownership and if you haven't made it your own mission and your own desire, then what was it all for? You know, so we can lead the sheep, the horse to water,
but you can't make it drink.
exactly, exactly. And I honestly think that's what it comes down to. But I do believe that if we have that hope, we can at least offer that, and then each person has to make that individual choice, and that's the gift of our free will, isn't it?
Yep.
And that's the tragedy of free will as well. But I also think there's a glory in the grace, because I tell you now, I did not deserve the grace that God gave me, and he poured it out so abundantly on me, and I think it's an incredible, overwhelming truth that I can't give credit to anything else but God for pulling me out of that pit, because I had people around me, and this was a clincher for me, I had people around me that spoke the truth to me. And when I was so confused and I was so psychotic, I was, you know, just not there and so lost and so broken, the truth was such a powerful tool to keep me just stable, you know, to give me parameters of reality again. And, you know, the truth, I didn't need to be victimized for my choices, because I made the choices knowing that they were wrong.
Yep.
But what I needed was to know that, yes, Anouska, they were wrong. So that's the truth. The truth that I was a victim is not the truth. The truth was I made a very bad choice, and yes, the abortions, but many other things as well. But if you face them and you really look at them, you're either going to run or you're going to get on your knees. When you see your sin for what it is, when I saw the state of me for what I really was, I knew that I needed a savior, because I could not live like I was. I was terrified of being that woman again, of having a heart that would turn to that again. But knowing that there was a God and a grace is terrifying, but it's so freeing when you release yourself to that, when you surrender to that love, that you don't need to do anything but be broken and face the truth. You know, I think something that I'm so passionate about is now obviously the truth, because it's not a little bit of the truth that sets us free. It's the fullness of truth, you know. And I think so much now, and especially I've experienced it myself in the past, people think that they're doing the loving thing by not speaking the truth, like by softening the blow. It's like a, you know, whereas it might be a bit more tough to say the truth, but the truth is always going to be the loving thing to do. You know, obviously there's a way we can do it, you know, and it's got to be from the right heart, but you're not actually helping anyone when you're telling them something that isn't the truth. Is it just to make yourself feel better? Is that why you're saying it? Because if you said the truth to them, maybe they'd react, they'd get upset, maybe they'd get angry, maybe they'd have that confrontation with what they'd done or what they'd said or what is really going on in their life and the reality that they're in. And you don't really want to face that moment. So we kind of self-soothe or soothe them. But real love is saying the hard stuff. And I had people willing to do that with me. And honestly, it was the biggest game changer, because they were willing to tell me the truth, but also walk with me while I faced it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really powerful.
So just on that, right? So I often, challenge people to think about, what is their core value, and when it comes to living life. And the way I sort of word this is like, okay, if you had to pick a core value, and it could be like almost anything. It could be success. It could be honest. It could be integrity. Like you name the word. It could be anything, right? But then you had to put them head to head. you know, like if it came, so as an example, when I was young, if you had to pick between, say, success and honesty, I'd probably choose success, right? Because, you know, you want to win at things, you want to achieve things, and you think that that's the way to go there. Over the years, like where I'm sort of at today is like I use the word transparency as opposed to honesty, because, you know, to go to what you were saying, you know, when you're a kid, you get told, you know, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it.
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, I'm not really being, you know, dishonest.
Yeah.
I'm just choosing to not say the things that perhaps people might not like to hear. And it's not to say that, you know, and whenever you take anything to the nth degree, there's always going to be negatives, right?
Yeah.
Like if you take success to the nth degree, of course, there's plenty of negatives that people could see about that. Likewise with transparency, like I've lost friends, you know, from being transparent.
Oh, wow.
them. And it's, you know, it's unfortunate. But at the same time, it's like, you know, when it's like, yeah, like when you have a friend that's in that pit and it's like, mate, just take the fucking rope.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
honestly.
you've thrown the rope down a million times where it's like, you know, you spend hours there waiting by the rope. Are you going to get on the rope or not?
Yeah.
Right? And unfortunately, sometimes, you know, as I said, it's up to that person to want to pull themselves out of that. And it's like, okay, I can choose to be here with the rope for the next however many days. But past that point, like, I've also got a life to live.
Yeah, and also you're not helping them, because if you're, here's a rope, come on, here's a rope, come on, here's a rope, I'll pick up your hands and I'll help you hold it, and then but no, they're not going to, they need to be clinging so tightly to that rope that they will be able to climb out of that pit with that rope. And if you're enabling in any way, it's not taking ownership, and that's different to supporting and journeying alongside. But I actually think there's, and it honestly, it makes me really angry when people, I mean, my mum's Dutch, so she's always been quite blunt, you know, and when I was growing up, I was like, oh, ouch, that's a bit.
Thanks, Mum.
Yeah, that's a bit, okay, yep, no worries. But now I see it as such a beautiful trait, because it's truthful. It's truthful, it's transparent, it's honest, it is what it is. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And life is so short and complicated enough already that we don't actually have the luxury of wasting time. And I guess it's, what's the saying? Bottle collar when you bottle feed them. Bottle, you know, like people, they also need to learn to put their big girl pants on or their big boy pants on and take ownership for their life. And we're not actually helping them when we don't let them do that. And that, I mean, addiction is a huge point for that. You know, I had to take ownership of my stuff. I had a lot of baggage and I needed to face it, and just crying victim or saying it's too hard. Okay, you can do that, but then you're going to be that person that's in their 50s that is still battling a severe addiction and still broken, and you're going to be resentful and blaming everybody else. When, what do you want from life? Do you hold on to that hope? Do you see that change? And then you got to be that change that you want to see, you know, and then actually start making those steps. But nobody else, like you've said, nobody else can do it for you. And I think it's sad if people have broken friendship with you over transparency, because I think it's actually such a gift. Such a gift to have people around you that are willing. We all have blind spots, and I'm so grateful that I have people in my life still now that if I ask them, they'll tell me. And sometimes even if I don't ask, if they think that it's a problem, and out of love for me, out of genuine care for the betterment of me on every level, they will bring it up with me. And I am so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that, because I have had too many times in my life where people didn't genuinely care enough about me to tell me the truth. And I only went deeper into things that now I look back, I wasted so many years, so many opportunities. And I was surrounded by people throughout that entire time. Yeah. You know, but how many?
The wrong kind of people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what was that process like for you when you've had this moment and it's like, okay, I'm going to take ownership of these things?
Yeah.
what
Terrifying.
was, yeah. So can you talk us through like,
Yeah.
some of, you know, because obviously, you know, we sort of also, because I've gone in like the chronological sort
Yes.
of order,
Yeah.
you know, it sort of helps to paint the picture. But like, I think, you know, we have the benefit of hindsight now.
Yes.
Whereas for you, you know, you're at the lowest of your lows.
Yeah.
Right. And people have often say, you know, the only thing good about hitting rock bottom is that you've got something to push up from, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've had some friends that tell you some hard truths about the things that you've done or your things that you're going through. And you've made the decision, okay, well, I'll try.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what happens from there?
Yeah, so I think that just those two things were just so different from all the therapies of, well, this week with your problem, we're going to talk around it in this way. But you've got this crutch for the rest of your life and you've just got to find out to what degree you're going to be able to master it. That's kind of the approach of the medical model system. And to have people that were interested in me, genuinely, like, who are you aside from all of the things that you've done that are negative and the things that you've battled that are negative. And I think that kind of started to confront the shame, because I think what happens with sin is it brings in shame, especially when you're starting to realize that maybe you're not stuck, you could get out. Then the shame is what pulls you back and keeps you down, and keeps you refusing to believe that hope, or telling yourself that it is too good to believe, it's too good to be true, that I could be different, that I could have a different life, that I could make different choices. But I believe that the power of our choice is just so phenomenal. And yeah, so I had hope instilled in me, in people. That's really what happened. It wasn't the same. I thought I was just going to go in there for another 3 months and then leave, like every other revolving door of every other place. And then I met these people and they were different, and they wanted to know me, and I kind of felt this spark of hope, and I was like, oh my gosh, could my life be different? And then we had these groups and these discussions where they started, especially with my one-on-one mentor, counselor guy, who started to just break down these lies that I'd built my life on. And one of them was God and who I believe God to be. And, you know, we started talking about many things, and he'd say, whoa. Oh, I don't know what God you're talking about, but you're not talking about the God of the Bible. You know? And I was like, oh, what? He's like, well, that's not what he does, and that's not what he says, and that's not who you are to him. And so that even, you know, obviously I was a mess in all the right ways. It kind of broke me to make me, but it made me think, well, who is he then? Who is he? And because I had always had that existential crisis, that longing for meaning and purpose and understanding, and I had this kind of spark ignite in me, and I was like, well, maybe this could be an answer. Maybe if I find out who he really is, so I know what's wrong. I know that what I've had was wrong, and I've got to face that. Okay, but that's actually quite freeing once I do that. But then I got to fill that space, you know. So, well, who is he really? And then I started pursuing that, and again breaking just down those lies that I was telling myself, and also having, because honestly, that my abortions were the scariest things that I had ever faced about myself. And in the medical model, they never gave me the time of day. Even though I was diagnosed with PTSD from them, and clearly there was so much dysfunction as a result, but they were never given more airtime. And I think that has been across the board just implemented into our society to become a norm, to, you know, blows my mind that they actually removed abortion as a form of grief and trauma in the latest DSM, which is the psych manual. Mm-hmm. So all these women that are making these choices and then left completely destroyed by them are going to these professionals to seek understanding, and their abortions won't get any acknowledgement because it's not there as any of the possible criteria or options for why she's presenting so broken and so traumatized. And yet it makes so much sense when we understand the connection of a mother with a baby in the womb during pregnancy and what that forced removal, the implications of that, what it would have on a mother. So I knew what I had done, but everyone else around me was victimizing me and saying like, oh, you didn't know what you were doing. And I was like, well, I knew what I was doing. Like, you know, so I'm not, you know, are women, are they competent? Are they independent? Are they smart? Or are they incompetent and, you know, can't even
understand? Have it both ways, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, do they know what they're doing or do they not? And I knew what I was doing. So but I had so much shame. And so that was a huge obstacle with the people that I trusted that were around me to break through that. And it got to the point where I said, okay, all right, well, I can receive God's forgiveness because he says it, that he forgives me, but I can't forgive myself. And then I had this revelation that I could never forgive myself. Above all, it was God's created life in there. It was never mine to take. I can't forgive myself for my own sin. Only God can. But he promises to.
Yeah.
He promises to. So that was the most terrifying thing that I have ever faced, to actually look that in the eye, but to know in the same breath that facing it was what was going to free me from it. And honestly, I have no more shame. And that is like, I just want that so bad for every woman that has been under that, because it's a curse. It's a heavy oppression that our society doesn't acknowledge.
Yeah.
It doesn't acknowledge. It actually says you should feel liberated and you should be celebrating this. But for those of us that feel broken and destroyed by it, well, that's just the most insane thing you've ever said to us.
Yeah. There's I did this podcast with a gentleman named Michael Lyons. He's passed away since, but he was very big on talking about this concept of moral injury. And I like bringing it up just because when I hear you talk about, you know, you're diagnosed with PTSD after the abortion, it was like, so that I guess the way that he sort of articulates it is like, well, that's that would be a symptom, not the root cause, right? And the root cause is, I guess, you know, this idea that, like you've injured your morals because morally you knew what you were doing.
Yeah.
And you know you've done something wrong. And so it's like, because you've injured your morality, so to speak, the outward symptoms are the PTSD, the addictions, all of these things that then come out as a result of it.
Yeah.
Right? But the key problem is you need to address the injury to your morality.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, in your example, the only way that you could do that was through facing this experience, you know, and with God.
Yeah.
Right?
And not believing the lies, because, you know, abortion was decriminalised in WA 30 years ago. And so I had full access to the abortions. And since then, we've gone all the way up to birth across the entire country. So at any point, within 30 years, we've gone from a criminal act to up to birth. Yeah. And politicians are talking about abortion, promoting it. We've got medical systems, you know, Medicare paid for my abortion, the first one. And so it's become so destigmatized and so normalized. And yet, and it's such a strange feeling, Johnny, because, you know that you're guilty. I knew that I was guilty. And yet I was in an environment where the world's saying, no, this is women's rights. This is female empowerment. This is reproductive freedom. Say, oh, no, that's not right. It's not right. That's, you know, and I think there's more people that realize the insanity of that than maybe are speaking out. You know, I think there are more of us that, 90,000 women every single year approximately have an abortion. And for every abortion, there's a mother that has to face the fact and live with the fact that she made that choice. How many of them are dealing with all these dysfunctions and these outward manifestations, like you said, from these from this deep moral injury, and a deep moral injury that can never be undone. And yet we as a society want to act like there's nothing to see here. It's like walking past a crime scene, being like, nah, it's all good, mate. It's all good. You know, you don't need to figure it out. Like, everything's okay. It's still safe. It's like, no, it's not. It's actually so unsafe for women's health alone. Like, if you don't even talk about the babies, because obviously that is just a horrendous atrocity, the innocent lives that are being slaughtered. But the women, like, I know so many women that have just been so broken and traumatized as a result of this. And yet, where's the interest? Where's the care? Where's the support? Where's the inquiry? Where's the funding into looking at that? It's not there.
Yeah.
And I think that's disgusting. And that's what feminists should be upset about, that.
Yeah.
You know, really, rather than just believing the lies. But I think having people around that, if I'm going back to what you asked, that were willing to tell me the truth, because they were so, and I've come to understand, when you've seen the power of the truth in action, the freedom that it gives someone, you know, I've never had a clearer mind. I've never had a calmer mind. I've never had a more secure mind than when it's founded on truth. And not just truth, obviously, I mean ultimately the truth of the gospel, but I mean just the truth of things. You know, we live in a world where there's so much falsities out there, so much misinformation, so many lies, that to actually get to the truth of something it's like having a rock in your hand. It's being able to stand on a firm foundation.
Yeah.
And I think if you're battling with things, having a stable surrounding, a stable fortress, a stable grounding is imperative. You need to feel safe. You need to feel secure. And if you have people around you that also have that understanding of the truth, and they want to equip you with the knowledge and understanding of the truth and help you journey through it in whatever way you have to get that freedom and that healing and that deliverance, that's so amazing, you know, that people will do that despite the lies that we're inundated with from media, from, you know, it actually should terrify us that our politicians are allowing such legislation to get through and go through. No protection for babies born alive and left to die.
Yeah.
You know,
the whole game of politics has really become, it's like more like a popularist thing as opposed to actual policy.
Yeah, and who said that they're representing us? I don't believe half of those people in there are representing us. The people that, I don't know, I don't believe I voted them in. I certainly didn't vote them in to legislate who can live and who can die. And yet when they get in, they think that they have all this power and they get money, power hungry, and then they start their own agendas. But it's certainly not for the people. You know, otherwise, where is all this care for women? Where's all this women's health? It's shocking.
Yeah, well, they're not for profits, unfortunately.
Exactly.
So like Diamond Women, Jenny Gurry, who does like great work, right? Like, you know, one of the things I was thinking about listening to your story is like, you know, if you had resources like that, you know, could something have been different?
Yeah, and this is where again it just amplifies to me. Like, oh my God, it's so good. I had everything. I had a friend offer to take me in and to even look after the baby once the baby was born until I was ready to have my baby back. They were ample. I had every option. I just didn't want to have a baby. And that, I think what people who are, you know, okay, abortion is wrong because killing innocent babies is wrong, but they are kind of unsure as to how extreme or the depth of understanding a woman might have of what she's doing. I think there's a journey to be had there for a lot of people to come to the point where, you know, you can hear someone like me say, I just didn't want to have a baby and I knew that it was murder. but I didn't want to have a baby, and so I did it. And that is at the heart of it. And there are young women who are being fed lies, and are being coerced and being manipulated, and that is absolutely evil, and we can never discredit that, but at the end of the day, those women will still have to come to terms with the fact that their babies are gone and that they were an accomplice to that act. And that only compounds the injustice and the shame and the pain and the trauma and everything like that. But what I've seen online since being involved with Bird Flip is it's actually been quite refreshing, as shocking as it has been. People on there who are so pro-abortion and just, because you're keyboard warriors, right? And
sorry, what is Bird Flip?
Oh, sorry, Bird Flip's the event that I'm in Sydney for.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah, so Dr. Joanna Howe is,
Yep.
And this is an initiative from her. And we're mainly on social media. And honestly, Johnny, I'm I'm new to that game, right? Okay, it's it's a beast unto itself, and I'm how
honestly,
do I do a reel?
Yeah, the online world's getting weird. I've been in this two minds about this, because it was kind of when I'm starting to get all the AI videos. I had this one that popped up where it was we're rescuing this octopus, and there's this AI video of these dudes washing this giant octopus, and I watched it, and I'm just it's kind of cool, right? And then I click on the comments, and I'm like, oh shit, this is AI. I got tricked, and then I was just fuck, I need to get offline.
Honestly, it's so funny. My dad, he loves watching, and my mum will love watching the the singing shows.
Yeah.
And I walked past the other day, and they're watching one. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's not even a deep fake. That's so fake. This little 8-year-old's holding a newborn, and she's singing, and then you've got all the what's his name? Colin Farrell? No, that's an actor. All the famous people in those shows that are applauding and people crying, and I'm like, this isn't even done well. This is just so clearly AI.
Yeah. Somebody's clipped it together.
Yeah,
and
it's so bad,
job.
so bad. But even I fall for it. One of my nieces, she's only 6, and she was watching something, and then a little ad for Frozen, a real live one, and so we watched the trailer, and then I went to my other nieces who are a bit older the next day, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a new Frozen, and I haven't watched Frozen, but they have, and they're like, oh no. Shame, Auntie Noosh, that's actually a deep fake. That's AI. Tricked. And I was like, okay, yeah, I need to get offline. This is, what am I wasting my time on? But it's been very enlightening, because I am not very tech literate.
Yeah.
And just trying to do any of this kind of stuff with reels. But the response has been wild. It's just been so extreme, pro and anti-abortion. And hateful, some people are so hateful. Somebody said, I hope you see your baby's murderer on the way to hell. And it's oh, okay, mate. And then another one's I'm going to have a late term abortion for you.
Yeah.
It's whoa, okay. Dude, it's gnarly. And I think in a way I've been, and obviously not everybody that's pro-abortion is that extreme, but people have a false sense of confidence on a keyboard.
Yeah.
And so they say these things.
I wonder if actually half of them are real.
Well, exactly.
Some of them could be bots, and they're just there to try and exacerbate
But there have
out of you.
Yeah, exactly. And there are trolls. But there are also been, I actually can't count now, how many women who have reacted, and then we've gotten into a conversation and they've had an abortion. And they're trying to make sense of what they're feeling, and they're trying to find a way to excuse what they've done, because whether they're a little aware of it or a lot aware of it, it has those severe implications on our being as a tripart being, spirit, soul, body. It'll have those effects on us forever, and it might show quickly or it might show later in life, but every woman who's had an abortion is battling that. And I think they go on to these, because it's clearly a pro-life group, and they're listening to these things, and then they'll say, my abortions were the best thing that ever happened to me. But you talk to them for 2 seconds and they're looking for absolution. they're looking for someone to explain to them what they're feeling and why they're feeling it and why it goes against the narrative that they're being fed, smothered with. And that just gets me so angry, because women deserve better than that. And if, okay, we shouldn't be making the choice to have abortions ever, but there are so many of us that have. Yeah. What about then? What are we going to do for these women then?
It's also for women that have miscarried.
100%. And that's where I feel so heartbroken for these women, because now they call them spontaneous abortions. They call miscarriages spontaneous abortions. Well, no, a miscarriage is natural.
Yeah.
That mother really wanted her baby.
Yeah.
And the baby would still be there if it hadn't naturally been lost. But abortion isn't. It's not fair to put them in the same pool. But that loss, that emptiness, that carries,
That's funny. You can buy a packet of cigarettes that have the warning, smoking can harm your unborn baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then,
honestly, and it's double homicide if you kill a pregnant woman.
Yeah.
But only if the baby's wanted, Otherwise, it's a different ball game. And I think it's just gotten to this point where enough is enough. Like, we just need to start speaking the truth about things and not being scared to do it.
I think it's just, it's funny because, when you talk about the whole misinformation thing, like, I think it's all just information.
Yeah.
The key is to actually just be able to have articulate conversations about it.
And just to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like, me saying my opinion, which is I think we shouldn't kill babies in the womb, shouldn't make people so volatile that we can't have a discussion.
Yeah.
And if your opinion was not to do with abortion, but something, outrageous, we should still be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I think what's been happening is we just block off when somebody disagrees with us.
It's so true because, I had people that used to, when I ran in the last federal election, I had people.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, people come after me and
they'd be
like, oh, I don't know, whatever negative thing they want to say to me. I'm like, oh, it's cool. You got a perspective. Like,
yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Because
they don't want to talk about
it. They'd send me back a message and say, I would never associate with somebody like you. I was like, okay, so you're cool to have a go. But I actually just want to talk to you about it.
Yeah.
I'm interested, as you see, when I do this, it's like I want to understand who you were as a person.
Yeah.
And what got you to this point and why do you believe the things that you do? I think they're very important ways to actually understand and empathize with somebody.
Do you think that part of that, why they do that though, is maybe because they don't actually even know what their perspective is? They're just repeating this jargon, these nonsensical arguments or this information that they're getting programmed with, in society and culture, and they throw that out. And then when you're like, okay, well, let's talk about it. Let's actually break it down. What does that mean to you, or what does that mean at all? They don't even know what they're standing on half the time.
I think some people do it, to have a bit of a rise. Like I had somebody comment on I did an episode with Craig Kelly and somebody said, 2 failures. And then I just said, thanks. What does it mean? What do I care what you think? Yeah. If you actually have some perspective, let's talk about it.
Well, I always think it's funny though, because those people are obviously coming onto your account.
Yeah. So they're watching it to then comment that I'm a failure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
If that's your view.
Yeah. How about you be constructive and just tell me what you took from it and what you thought, but they don't, because they're not there for that.
Well, I think, actually, on this topic, the algorithm does definitely feed people different things.
Yeah, right.
So I've got a friend and, he thinks very differently, contrary to a lot of my beliefs. And we got into, a deep discussion on some of those things. And it was quite interesting. That was some of the stuff that became very apparent was the resources that he's referring to and the resources that I would refer to, 2 totally different algorithms.
Yeah, wow.
Right? And it's kind of interesting, just how much influence that can have, right? Because it's at the end of the day, it comes down to what you're consuming, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think, part of that is you need to, I don't mind consuming alternative resources, resources from people that have contrary views to me, because I think you know, in any perspective, it's the old saying of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because there are some, perhaps there are some more stable foundations to certain things, doesn't mean that everything then, you know, you can take to the nth degree. Because 100% on like the pro-life side, like people then conflate that and then get into the batshit crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, unfortunately then that takes away from the actual, like the real core issue that you want to deal with.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it too, right? Like sometimes it's like, okay, I talk about one specific thing and then we'll take that on a tangent to something else. And it's like, well, hang on a second, we should just go back to that one specific issue, right? I think that's a natural thing for any human to do.
100%. And I think just even being willing to put alternative narratives out there, like, which is what we've seen with Dr. Howe and with Bird Flip, is, well, hang on a second, the pro-abortion camp has had the microphone on this issue. That's the whole thing. Had the mic on this issue for so long now, spilling their side of what they want us to believe about abortion. But we haven't heard the other side. We're not being given that education and that information. So I think it's time that Australia does hear that and does have the opportunity to hear these stories. And the sad thing is that a lot of women, because of the shame and because it's almost a stigma now to say that you have had an abortion or you're pro-life. You know, it's destigmatized to have an abortion and it's normalized to have an abortion and to be celebrating that even. But to be in opposition to it or to have been left traumatized by it, that's the stigma. That's the thing that we don't want to talk about or acknowledge. But that's the thing that we believe, as with the Bird Flip and with Joe, Dr. Howe, that's what Australians need, especially when we're facing elections and they're legislating this kind of thing. And yet how much of this topic and how far we've gone do Australians really know? You know, we go out on the streets and talk to people and a lot of people don't know what's going on and they don't know it's gotten this far. And yet it's happening and they're pushing it further and further. So I think just having people willing to have the conversation, like you said, with bringing it out there, just bringing more to the story of things out there, you know? I think it's dangerous. Otherwise you get pigeonholed and, like, obviously people could say that for me, like, oh my gosh, you're so obviously pro-life and you're not seeing this as a nuanced issue and you're not, you know, you're not going to see it from the other side. Well, I think there are some things that, because I hold a worldview that believes that things like murder are wrong and immoral, that are very black and white, you know? But then obviously the things around it, like you said, giving the support to women and making sure that prenatal support is there and that we are equipping women to have pregnancies and supporting men and encouraging men to stand up and be the men and the father that they need to be to care for this woman and the baby. And, you know, that's obviously another whole topic. They need to man up. But also on the other side, to look after women who have, you know, been left traumatized and the lies that the abortion industry feeds. Because, yes, that is more detailed, but I do believe that the central issue is just very black and white, you know. I'm so in favour. I've been watching for years now in America, they're putting through all these equal protection bills. So if human life begins at the moment of fertilization, then every human life should get equal protection inside or outside of the womb. Doesn't matter the geographic position or the gestational developmental age. We should all have the same rights. And I think that makes so much sense to me.
Yeah.
It's just so much sense. And sometimes we just overcomplicate these issues, you know? Even like, dare I go there, the gender thing. It's like, it's so simple, like male and female, men and women, like.
Yeah. If in doubt, follow the money.
Yeah.
That's what I always go back to.
Exactly.
You know, like if people can make money off it, like there's always going to be an opportunity for people to game the system, so to speak. And sometimes, you know, in doing that, they don't necessarily make the choices that are better for people. They make the choices that are better for profits.
Well, and you're so right, because abortion is a $1 billion industry.
Yeah.
$1 billion.
As you said, Medicare paid for yours, right? Yeah. And so somebody's getting paid, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the bigger the baby, the more money they get. And then you've got the whole baby trafficking body parts that's going on. You know, it's huge. And the funding that our government gives, you know, that globally, it's horrific. And I think it's so much easier sometimes not to look at such great evil.
Yeah.
But then how are we going to overcome it if we don't face it?
So I guess, you know, it's a nice way to sort of wrap things up. Are there any other organisations that you need to shout out? So BirdFlip was one.
Oh, yeah, BirdFlip's one, definitely, please. Dr. Joanna Howe. And there's so many pro-life groups. So Cherish Life in Queensland are amazing. Right to Life in Canberra, really, really good. Right to Life in WA, really good as well. And the pregnancy support groups like Pregnancy Problem House, Diamond Women, Pregnancy Franklin, we've got those available on BirdFlip. So if women are pregnant and need that support, that's there. But yeah, just linking in and supporting each other, especially when we're coming up to the elections. So we've got letterbox drops tomorrow for the New South Wales Premier because of the bill that the Greens have put forward about the having faith institutions having to do abortions. And it's heating up. It is an election issue now. So finding out, we have those resources about how to vote if you are voting for life. But yeah, just linking in and also having the conversations, because, you know, 1 out of 3 to 1 in 4 women have had an abortion. So that means that we're interacting with a lot of women that this is a real topic for. And it's one thing for us to say it's wrong, but we also have to be there to catch them when they're facing the fact that it is what it is. And they want to move on with their life. They want to find that healing. They want to find that wholeness, and they don't want to be kept in that space. And that is totally a possibility. And that's also, it comes down to that hope again, doesn't it? It's like, you know, yes, we're talking about great evil and a lot of serious, devastating things, but there's always hope, you know, and there's those of us that are wanting to connect with you to provide that for you and to give you that option and to just remind you that that rope is there.
Yeah. All right. That's a beautiful way to end this. Thanks, everyone.
Woo. Thank you for having me.